And I announced the meeting. The meeting is entitled, "The recent meeting between Myron Katz and Michael Watson is the focus of tonight's meeting, and the date and everything." So, okay, so the starting from the bottom of the thread, because that's how you really should read emails, not from the top. So it turns out that Michael
Myron, before
Watson.
you jump into the weeds, why don't you tell us who this person is, an overview of what you discussed, and then you can jump in the weeds, okay?
All right. First of all, I never heard of him a week ago. Okay. I am not super avid participant in the electricity brain trust. In fact, the specific thread that he was talking about, I wasn't super interested in. It's called, I can highlight it here in case anybody can see. Any views on the PJM auction results released Tuesday, 22nd of July. That was the title of the red. So it turns out I know who started the thread. The thread started by someone very important to me, a guy named Amory Levins, but I didn't put the whole thread in there. In case you don't know what PJM is, that's the wholesale marketplace that serves Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland. Much like MISO, it's a wholesale place for many utilities, many states, and you already know three from the name, but it goes all the way to Chicago and points quite a bit north of those states. Anyway, it's for sure the preeminent wholesale marketplace. And what does it mean by wholesale auction? Well, what happens is that if a utility or any other provider wants to sell electricity into that marketplace, they have to establish themselves as being qualified to sell electricity. And then once they do, they get to buy a share of the marketplace, like 10% or whatever, some number like that. Another one was 20%. And they don't really own it even after they do that, but they're saying, I'm going to sell kilowatts or kilowatt hours, or megawatt hours, whatever it is they are going to be using as the unit of what they're selling. And I'm going to sell it. And if I sell it cheaper than you, I get the market and everyone else has to wait. So that's what they mean by the auction. So it's not who sells it for the most, it's who sells it for the least, the wins auction. Anyway, that's pretty much it. And every wholesale marketplace has an auction every year. And this was sent in July, so we recently did it. Okay. So,
Myron, is it okay if I just correct one thing?
sure.
Just because I've spent time in Ohio, but PJM actually is across 13 states as well. Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, but Pennsylvania,
Yeah,
Tennessee, bunch of.
I suggested it was a lot more than those three states.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh,
And
sorry.
I said it went all the way to Chicago. So that pretty much suggests what you just said.
Yeah,
But I don't
sorry.
know the exact state names. And it doesn't have a footprint like MISO where it is
Okay,
everything.
so what's the point? What's the point?
Well, anyway, so they were talking about it, and I didn't get into the weeds. I wasn't particularly interested in this particular issue. However, all of a sudden, there was this really weird thread, a statement in a thread. And this is what I'm going to highlight right now. This is what got my attention, so I can get it to show up. I don't know why the whole thing is showing up instead of just the top. But all I wanted to do is show this, okay? It said, demand response is a top-down command and control solution. Regular people don't trust the utility or an aggregator to make decisions on their best interests. That statement is extremely germane to ProRate Energy's interest in the current distributed energy resources docket that we're in. And we've sort of talked about that in various ways, kind of ad nauseum, but if you don't see the connection, the Together New Orleans and Alliance for Affordable Energy came together and said, you got $32 million in your hands, utility regulator, that you're supposed to help customers for because we just spent the money and Grand Goof nuclear power plant didn't do what we're supposed to do. And so we've got this money in hand. And what they want to do is build a virtual peaking plant, VPP, which is going to have an aggregator, which is the key word in the sentence, who will orchestrate every home's battery system to produce electricity and send it into the grid in an orchestrated fashion. And so this guy said, demand response, which by the way is another way for this can happen, where the utility says, I will give you a $1 for every $10 I save by letting me control your air conditioner's thermostat. That is the simplest form of demand response, but a more sophisticated one and more significant is running a home's inverter and batteries, so that the batteries don't just they don't just decrease demand, but they actually provide power to the grid. So that's what the Alliance for Affordable Energy and Together New Orleans is promoting. We are not against that. We just think all the money, not all the money should be spent that way, but 10% through another way. However, Together New Orleans and Alliance didn't just say they want to have batteries, they want to have it all orchestrated by one aggregator or the utility and make decisions for everyone, which is the key part of the sentence that I highlighted. And then he goes on to say, I don't know if you can see better highlighted or not, so I'm going to leave it non-highlighted and change the screen resolution so it shows up. Oh, press the wrong button. So that it shows the text a little bit bigger. So I'm going to try to go to higher screen resolution so you can see it. Okay.
So, Myron,
So
is there a way to, again, are you going to show us something else about this?
yeah, I'm going to tell you about the conversation I had with him.
Okay,
So
so why
because
don't you
he
do
said
that?
this, all right. So notice that he, at the bottom, he says, let me just read what he wrote because it's not long. It's like 3 sentences. Several South Carolina co-ops, which sounds like not far from where you are, nor Christopher, implemented a real 3-part rate with residential demand in an $8 to $12 range and a 3-hour window on peak. And I saw some data last week that indicates, and unfortunately the screen screwed up and I can't see everything. We just change a little bit lower screen resolution. That indicates a significant lowering of system demand during the on-peak hours with no bounce back peak. And it sends a meaningful price signal. He says implicitly, he's saying implicitly, instead of doing what he said in the first two sentences, send a meaningful price signal and let the individuals decide it's free, simple, and it works. Which, that is to say, he pretty much agrees with us. Don't do an orchestrated use of customers' resources, whether it's decreasing demand or providing supply. Provide a good price signal. All right. That was enough for me to say, I want to talk to this guy. So I solicited him and I said, very interested, novel, effective tell use rates. Please call. So anyway, he said he would call. And then we had a conversation on Tuesday, I think it was July 30th. And no, maybe it was Tuesday, it was whatever. So he spoke and then he wrote back. Before he called me, I hoped to entice him to call him. And I said, here's something about me and our nonprofit. And I gave a link to our change.org site and I care a lot about creating solutions that are scalable to most of the world, and if widely adopted, create great impacts on reducing the causes of climate change. My hometown and birthplace will be underwater unless we do something like turn this around. I'm not giving up very soon. I have done things in my life that other people consider more impossible. I didn't list them. I think the key to getting enough participants worldwide is paying people to do the right thing. So maybe that encouraged him. And we did have the phone call. And after the phone call, he wrote, that's what I'm reading now. Myron, I enjoyed our conversation this morning. You certainly have a clear vision of where you are going. I have long practical experience in the utility industry, and you outlined some of that in the conversation. The issues you are passionate about will not yield to logic and rigor. These issues are emotional and political. Unless you can gain momentum in these areas, you'll be tilting at windmills, which I think he's right. We're doing a really good job of tilting at windmills. There are a couple of phrases that I use to clarify my position. Quote, if carbon is the problem, nuclear is the answer, unquote. You seem very pretty dead set against nuclear. Nuclear is the only carbon-free base load energy source that has been deployed at scale. The laws of physics dictate that if you want 100% carbon-free electricity, then nuclear must be part of the solution. And this is a really interesting quote. Energy is cheap, reliability is expensive. Wind and solar may be the least cost energy source, but there isn't enough storage of any form to ride through the periods of no wind and winters in the north. Renewables and batteries will not get us to 100% carbon-free electricity in this century. These are common sense realities that people in the utility industry deal with. I'm happy to continue discussion because the rates we discussed today need to be part of the solution too. Let me know if you want. So right after that conversation, I asked him if he would mind joining ProRate Energy at Google Groups, and he said he would, and he did. And he got invited, and maybe he was hoping he would be here. So what he said about his own background knowledge in the utility industry, he said that he helped run an electric co-op and eventually became the CEO of it, and he ran it for about 10 years. And he's very familiar with what works and what doesn't. So, and obviously you saw that he's a professional engineer. So that is the kind of thing we're talking about. I don't know what else I should tell you. I think this is enough of a lead in to have a quality conversation. And I think Christopher already has a deep interest and knowledge of nuclear, because one of the things he did on his submarine is ride around a nuclear submarine.
Oh, were you an NTO or?
I was.
Oh, wow. I have a lot of friends who are NTOs out in Norfolk, Virginia.
Well, I got to ride the submarine. That was really the principal goal.
There you go.
I mean,
That's awesome. Well, thank you for your service. I didn't know.
I worked really hard when I was in the military, when I was doing military things. When I wasn't in the military, not doing military things, I didn't work very hard. I played hard. I was a surfer dude for a while. So I
Cool.
practiced, spent half the year practicing blowing up the planet, the other half of the year riding cool waves. 3 months on, 3 months off, 3 months on, 3 months off. It
Wow.
worked out pretty good eventually.
I
I
want to make some.
Very
Go
cool.
ahead,
ahead.
go. Want to. I mean, I'm glad that you tell us that, because it's good to us to have a really friendly conversation. And it may be we'll go back there in 10 minutes after we realize we have nothing else to say. But let's try to go down the road of this issue. So Amy Lovins, who actually started this thread, has often stated that nuclear power is so expensive, maybe 3, 4, 5, 10 times as expensive as solar. And he thinks we shouldn't be going down that road because we can solve our energy problems without it. On the other
Well,
hand,
again, he can say that all he wants, Okay, that doesn't make it true.
Oh, no.
Not in my backyard is my comment.
Well, let's,
Yeah, but that's exactly where it should be. Okay.
No, not, I don't want a radioactive hole for the future longevity of my entire family to have to deal with.
You know, if you put an energy source 3 feet in the ground in your backyard, okay, you would, there would be infinitesimal amount of interaction that you would have with you and your other family members. I mean, you know, radiation isn't this magical thing, and most of the decay products that come out of radiation aren't nearly as bad as the things that created them.
well, I want to interrupt you because I actually was a very avid anti-nuclear activist. In the first decade, I was an energy advocate because that was the thing to do. It was easy to poke shots at it like we're doing right now. And I don't really know that I think that means that I know better than anybody. I will tell you, though, that the nuclear waste issue has been grossly understated how dangerous it is. However, even it is as bad as I think it is, it's still worthy of our consideration because what's happening while we don't do nuclear fast enough is New Orleans is going to cease to exist. And I think
Mhm.
I'll put a number out there, which I think is the right order of magnitude, but I don't know the details. There's probably on the order of 2 to 400 trillion dollars of real estate within 5 meters of sea or 5 feet of sea level on the US coast alone. And it's probably 2 to 5 times that much for the rest of the world. And when that real estate disappears, it's not going to happen in such a nice way that it's not going to cause major disruptions. Like we are right now, quote unquote, terrified of the immigrants and throw everybody out bullshit. Okay. And last year, when we had a different president, we were quite different. But there's going to be this kind of migration of people from one part of the world to the other that's going to cause lots of disruption, if not tens or millions or billions of deaths, which dwarfs anyone's prediction of what might come from nuclear waste, even those who are far off on the left end, like I might be. I mean, we need a clean energy future, and clean, unfortunately, might not be as clean as we want if we don't pursue something fast enough that really works. Okay, so if we look at the point of what's cheap without taking account into what's reliable, we may have a naive view of what we need to do to solve this problem. And that's what I want to put on the table. I'm going to tell
Or,
you,
Byron,
yeah,
Mr. Torres, something to say. So.
you're talking about the old generation of nuclear reactors, which had a tendency to blow up. And the problem in the past has not been the technology. It has been places like Russia and Japan and where they cut corners or they had incompetent staff or they made really stupid decisions. The newest generation of nuclear plants have solved a lot of those with adequate fail-safe systems, where they can literally run out of cooling fluid and just stop. Again, they use molten salt and a lot of other safe things. But the nuclear waste problems at its core is a 10,000 to 100,000 year problem. You're going to be paying to manage this stuff for, well, let's say longer than recorded history. So it's a cost.
Well, you know, okay. The idea that nuclear waste is going to be dangerous for a long, long time is a valid scientific point. But ascribing any damage or risk associated with utilizing that long-term wise is just schoolgirl bullshit. Okay, we have, in fact, we did until Jimmy Carter came along. Okay, spent billions of dollars to create glass vitrification, which essentially takes the waste and turns it into glass marbles that we put into canisters that are going to be stable for around 30,000 years. And then we
No,
dump it
not
into
even
a
close.
salt mine. Say again?
Oh, if you know anything about geology, you know that radioactive elements migrate through the hard rock exceedingly fast.
Well, look, I think,
Okay.
look, I just want to say, I don't want to spend our time here arguing about what we think we know about the nuclear waste. I believe we can make an absurd but safe assumption that even if it's 100 times worse than anyone is suggesting, it's still not even on the same order of magnitude compared to the consequences of climate change. And I
Oh,
think
no,
that,
no. Wait. The biggest argument against nuclear is it's inherently more expensive, like
okay,
That's
three
right.
times more.
That's right.
I know it
Okay.
is. Look,
100% right.
no, wait a
Okay.
minute.
Now,
Let's just,
how did we go from $9 a pound for yellow cake into tens of billions of dollars of wasted in, redundancy and everything that we've got out there today?
look, I'm trying to say, I think the question isn't that. I mean, I don't disagree with you guys that are making good points. And I can give you some serious good points about how dangerous it is, which I'm trying to refrain from. I'm trying to say, let's assume that nuclear power is 10 times worse than anyone suggested, which means that every time we produce a kilowatt hour, we have 1/100th of 1/1,000,000th of a chance of killing someone, or whatever the right number is. But when you consider what's happening now with the fossil fuel industry and the destruction to the planet that's absolutely for sure baked in unless we turn it around, that's what I want to talk about. Not whether or not it costs twice as much or 10 times as much, or whether the ratio is 1 to 1,000,000 or 1 to 100 million. The
Okay.
numbers
But Myron, okay. I see where you're headed and I'll go with you. But the point isn't, it is a valid criticism to say that nuclear costs more. It's not a valid criticism to say that nuclear is inherently dangerous. Okay, more so than other things we do in life. Okay, I'll give you that commercial flight had 5 years on the nuclear industry. But certainly by the time we started flying people in aircraft across the country, we started generating power from nuclear power plants. I'm talking early 50s. And how many deaths has there been during that time?
I'm sorry, how many what?
How many people have died because of nuclear power during that time?
I believe I know a number probably 10,000 times bigger than yours. But I don't care. Suppose it is 10,000 people died from nuclear power plants, which is way
How did
beyond
you
what
come
most
up
people.
with? How did you come up with? How did they die?
I'm going to
Why?
explain it to you.
Wait. Why are we beating a dead horse here? We know
Yeah.
nuclear is dead. We know fusion energy is dead. We know hydrogen fuel is dead because
No,
it's inherently more expensive. Who the
no,
hell wants to pay 3 times as much?
excuse me. It's not true. What you just said is not true. Nuclear fusion is not dead, and people are building small nuclear reactors and right now in various places, and they're hoping it's going to succeed, and they're hoping to build 10 times as much the next year, etc. And fusion, as you say, is possible. It also might be quote unquote clean. I think it's probably a lot cleaner. The bottom line isn't whether or not it's expensive. Everyone knows it's expensive. Not whether or not it's dirty. People will say it's not that dirty. Some people say it's a lot more dirty. I don't think the question isn't that. The question is, are we going to recognize that we need to put things that are more expensive and more dirty on this planet to turn climate change around in a reasonable amount of time to save the hundreds of trillions of dollars of infrastructure in this country alone that is going to be lost with sea level rise? I mean, that the difference, if you compare one cost to the other, I would say the nuclear added cost and the nuclear avoided carbon footprint is comparable in importance. And unless we sit down with the real numbers, okay, we're not going to really know. The point is, if you look at the ICCC, whatever it is, the International Committee on Climate Change, they absolutely, for sure, unequivocally say we need to do nuclear to stop climate change. And it's a policy of this country, it's a policy of many countries to expand nuclear. We can decide I'm an anti-nuclear activist and I say no. And I know I'm probably better equipped to explain why we shouldn't do nuclear from the point of view of the number of deaths. But the number of deaths we're talking about, even if it's 10,000, 100,000, or a million from the expansion of nuclear, it's trivial compared to what's happening with fossil fuels. So I think that's clear, even if we don't really know the numbers. And it's also true that nuclear power is more expensive, whether it's 2 times, 10 times, 100 times. That's also true. The question is, are those things needed? And as Michael Watson said, I'm highlighting it again on the screen, okay? Energy is cheap, reliability is the one that's expensive. That's what's expensive. In fact, the DER docket is all about reliability. Namely, it grew out of the reliability or resilience docket. And it said, okay, how are we going to get resilience in a power storm? What are we going to do? How are we going to get there? And that's how TNO came up with these community lighthouses. And there wasn't enough money for it, and they wanted more money, and they found this $32 million, and they wanted to add more, and they wanted to figure out how that was going to provide more resilience and more reliability. Okay, that's expensive compared to the energy itself, which we can literally put out there for, 3 or 4 cents a kilowatt hour at the wholesale, and not much more, twice to 3 times that at the retail. It's way, way cheaper to make solar energy and wind energy than nuclear. But the bottom line isn't that. The bottom line is a whole grid needs to run on to be resilient and get us through these power outages. And unfortunately now with the AI stuff, which I am not a fan of, but nevertheless it's reality, and we must face reality, there's going to be a great increase in the demand for electricity, and those AI centers need, according to their own assertions, they need super reliable electricity. So let's face reality and stop pissing over whether it's this clean or this expensive, or that expensive. Let's just admit it's something like 2 to 10 times as expensive and exceptionally more dangerous. But in my opinion, nowhere near as dangerous as not having them. That's what I want us to talk about.
Yeah, erosion has been with us since I was a little kid. I went to the Jersey Shore and my pastor showed me where he used to live. It was miles out and it was all gone,
Right.
and that was in the 60s.
Uh-huh.
So, it's not like it's a new problem. It's always erosion is, we shouldn't build where it's dangerous.
But we have.
I
Look
know,
at
because we're all stupid.
Well, you look at a 5-foot sea level rise or 10-foot sea level rise around Washington, D.C. and see what percentage of that is gone, or around New York City, and certainly around New Orleans. And if you look around the whole planet, we're talking about hundreds of trillions of lost value, and the kind of migration of immigrants immigration or because of climate change will literally kill hundreds of millions, if not billions of people if we don't stop this problem. I think that's the reality of it. And
we created the problem. We got off the boat and built a house 5 feet from the water. That was stupid as hell.
Okay, but we can't fix what's already done just because we say it's stupid. We have to
Well,
decide whether or not we take, um, I'm arguing on behalf of this advocate, Michael Watson, saying
right.
we need, I'm just go down this road. Let's try to discuss it.
No, but he's an idiot. I'm sorry. He is stuck in the past way of thinking. He has missed the last 10, possibly 20 years of innovation in grid scale batteries, ACC wiring, geothermal. He doesn't mention that at all. He makes these pronouncements. You can't get 100% carbon free economy without nuclear. And that's just nonsense.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Let's suppose you're right. We can get 100% carbon-free economy with nuclear. Okay, when? 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50
Oh,
years?
no,
What do
no.
you
But
think?
go to your second point. We are headed for the Cretaceous. I put a image of today's precipitable water reading, and tropical air is again crossing the pole. You got to understand what that means.
So what
You're
does that
not going to
mean?
stop sea levels rise in the next 20 years. You're not going to stop us getting into a Cretaceous-like weather pattern. Now, you're in a Cretaceous-like weather pattern. There's all these plants that people aren't used to growing that they're going to use instead of the ones that they have been growing out of the grass family. Grass family crops, corn, wheat, and
All right,
rice are cold, wet
wait.
adapted plants.
Just a minute, Tor. Let's suppose we do everything you think we should do. The hell with price, or maybe price is not a problem. When do we stop climate change from getting worse?
It's going to take 50 years.
Do you think it might take fewer decades with nuclear than without nuclear?
It would take more.
I'm sorry.
It would take substantially more.
Oh, wait a minute. I don't think you heard my question.
No, I heard it clearly.
Are you saying that we will stop the climate from getting worse with nuclear sooner or without nuclear sooner?
Because more resources would go into nuclear instead of things that are more efficient, that would produce more power. It will actually slow you down.
Oh, so you're saying reaching the place where we have stability in the climate is going to happen slower if we spend an extra $15 trillion on nuclear than if we just keep going down the road of building batteries and solar.
Well, this idea that we have unlimited resources is bogus.
I know, but I need you to clarify what you just said.
Yeah.
I
The
heard
second
negative.
is
No, wait,
that
you're saying
you,
that,
you've got a tension between what you're going to spend on healthcare and what you're going to spend on infrastructure.
no, but
Because,
just a minute. Don't give me the arguments why. I just want the conclusion. You're
the
saying that
conclusion.
the
If
conclusion,
you buy a car that costs 3 times as much instead of 3 cars, you can only do 1/3 as much work.
excuse me, I want the conclusion in a simple sentence. What you're saying is if we go down the road and try to stop climate change in any kind of significant way with nuclear power, we will reach stasis decades later than if we don't use the nuclear option. Is that what you're saying?
Bluntly put, yes.
I
Okay, well,
agree.
that's what I want to hear. Okay, I want to hear that. You're saying the nuclear option will help us reach stasis, but it'll take 2 or 3 decades longer to reach stasis, right? That's what you're saying.
It's the hard way to do it. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go down that road because I think what Michael Watson is saying, energy is cheap. We can make cheap energy and we can make lots of cheap energy with solar and wind, but we won't get the reliability and resilience we need without nuclear. And you think that's bullshit?
He doesn't know about the innovations in geothermal.
Okay, so let's go down that road. That's all right. Listen, let's not laugh, everybody. Let's try to
Oh,
find
no.
out.
Yeah.
Let's try to listen.
Geothermal, before they drilled vertical holes, they had a very little surface area in the rock. They were very expensive. Modern ones use the same that the lateral drilling they use for the oil industry. They run for miles underground. They can lace just like floors of a building, a large rock deposit of geothermal energy. And they only, when they need power, they pump something liquid down that heats up and brings up, and they run it through the steam changer. So the response time is actually better than a lot of other power sources. They can respond in seconds.
Okay, so let me talk about what you just said. Now, I don't know all the numbers. I happen to have been in Colorado literally literally yesterday. And there was a webinar that I attended a week before about promoting ground coupled heat pumps, which they call geothermal heat pumps. But I objected to the terminology, but that's what it is. It's really ground coupled heat pumps using the approach you're doing, and not just using that, but a variety of other things. But they didn't begin to suggest that would have a 2% or 5% effect on the energy. They say it displaces what the natural gas industries are doing, and so makes a big dent in the cost of making people warm in the winter in the cold climates. That's all they were talking about. And I will say that I've had a ground coupled heat pump in New Orleans since 1986. And it costs next to nothing to go down 150 feet when there's no bedrock anywhere to be found for 17,000 feet in New Orleans. But if you try going down 10 feet in Colorado, you're going to be spending all the money you would have spent in New Orleans to go 1,500 feet just to go through all that stupid rock. Now, of course, Colorado may be the worst case, and New Orleans is the best case, and there's some medium place in the rest of the country where this works well. Is that what you're saying, Tor?
Synthetic diamonds make drilling in Colorado only slightly more expensive than New Orleans.
It's hard to believe. That's okay.
No, they use gas. Again, the big innovation with synthetic diamonds is to use a methane in electrolysis, basically, to cause the very small synthetic diamonds to grow. They grow at, I think, a millimeter a month or something like that. That it cut the cost of synthetic diamonds by about 90%.
And so
Again,
you're
if you
saying,
don't know of these innovations, you're stuck in an old way of thinking.
well, it's okay with me. I don't mind being educated. That's why we're having this discussion.
Yeah, I posted a map of the U.S. geothermal. And so they go usually down a mile or so, and then they angle the thing. And out of the same borehole, they can run radial, just like the spokes on a tire on a wheel on a bike. And so they can tap all that layer, and then they can go down deeper and do another blend. And then they drum side holes where they space them, I think, 180 yards so that they frack the rocks. And so the water's got to go between the two. I mean, they do all the things they were doing for the natural gas. They're just doing it with geothermal. And the best thing is it is true base load power. It's responsive within seconds, and they can go from 0 to whatever you want. I mean, and its cost compared to nuclear is about 10%, maybe 5%. So if all you really knew is these there's a geothermal area in Arkansas. It's very well known as geologic. So you put you radiate power lines 1,000 miles from Arkansas. That's your baseload power. You say, how much are the transmission lines? And that's where ACCC wiring gets in there with, grid scale batteries on either end. And the improvements to the efficiency of the transmission lines was just stunning. It's like 4 to 6 times. So, I mean, moving power 1,000 miles is not as expensive as it used to be, not as hard. Again, you can bury DC lines underground along railroad easements. They don't care. So
Okay.
again, the idea you can wire the United States with a base load on geothermal, it is a fraction the cost of a nuclear system.
Okay, so when you say the word geothermal, you're not talking about ground coupling like I have in New Orleans. You're talking about really hot land, below the ground, hot enough to boil water, have to go down a relatively small distance, right?
They put down either water or they put something else. One of
It
the
doesn't
things I
matter.
like to use is gases
It
because the
doesn't matter
gases.
whether it's water, that's not the point. It's real geothermal in the sense that you tap into it and you got a heat source and you can run a turbine from it.
Yeah,
Whereas what I do, all I'm doing is heat exchanging. I have an extremely efficient heat transfer system. I spend I spend 1 kWh running the pumps and I get 6 kWh back in heat exchange from my home. So I've got a COP of 6. My air conditioner runs with a COP of 6 and it was installed in 1984. The best you can buy today, which are air source heat pumps, are around 4 or 5. And that's super good. And it's good enough to avoid using natural gas in the north, but that's trivial compared to the COP of 6. And in this case, it's not a COP of 6. It's way greater than that because you're not doing it in a COP way. You're literally taking energy out of the ground with geothermal. Okay. And that's not ground coupling, it's geothermal. You're taking energy out of the ground to create something that'll turn your turbine and make electricity, whether it has to go through steam or some other fluid, is what you're saying. Okay. So
Well, what he's pretending is that we will have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles of these underground fissures that are created to create heat. But the latency on that is maybe 1 to 4 years at best. Now,
right.
you can start going down to 15 or 20 or 30,000 feet, okay, and you can get some real temperatures. But just remember that BP spent almost $1 billion on the deep well horizon to go down 29,000 feet. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that I'm a fan of geothermal energy. I'm certainly a fan of ground coupling systems. But you've got to understand is that some places are just not just only not economically feasible, but not technically feasible either. I guess the second point that I'd like to make is that people are afraid of nuclear, but they trust it.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that if you say we're going to supply the power to the city here from this nuclear power plant, that becomes something that they can conceive of and to a certain extent believe it to be resistant. I won't say resilient, but believe it to be resistant.
I just want to point out
to catastrophic failure.
I just want to point out the whole DER docket grew out of a gross failure of a nuclear power plant, which I call grand goof. And of course, I don't believe that we're so stupid to
And
build.
what was that failure, Myron? That failure was based upon operation. It had nothing to do with the nuclear power plant.
Well, yeah, you're right, and I disagree with you. I mean, I don't disagree with you. And when we examined and tried to explain how stupid Waterford 3 was and how it had problems and it was built wrong, the way Waterford 3 operators fixed the problem was they grounded off the top of the boats so no one could tell that they
Right.
put in the wrong thickness of boats. That's how they, quote, resolved the problem. Okay.
Right.
And that kind of shit was common in the 70s. And I don't believe it's going to disappear just because we're 30, 40, 50 years later. But, and I agree with you, we rely on that stuff. And I also believe that if we had an accident like 3 Mile Island or Fukushima or the one in Russia, I forgot the name of it.
Chernobyl.
Right. I believe those accidents cause tens or hundreds of thousands of deaths. But I still think we need to go down that road if that's the only way we can speed up the stability of the planet's climate. And Tor just said it won't get us there faster. I think that's what's interesting. He said it will not get us there faster because other technology is faster and cheaper and will get us energy quicker.
There is no technology that will get us there, but the demand side management could, which is God only knows the principal reason I'm playing with this group right now. Okay.
Well, right.
Okay. Is because what you guys want to do is what I believe we should be doing.
I agree. I agree. And the only question in my mind is, and I really do not know, I don't know why Tor feels so confident. I really do not know when we should reasonably expect the climate to stop getting worse.
No,
Okay.
you've got a feedback system now, very similar to what we projected as part of the Cretaceous and the Mesozoic, where CO2 just rises to a level. It creates more dust and smoke by fires and other things in the atmosphere. That nucleates the cloud, the sunlight goes into the ocean. That's what we got. That's how you got on my slide. You've got tropical air at the pole. And it's already going to be down in Antarctica in 5 to 10 years, and that's the end of the ice sheets.
Okay. So, why you think you're saying what's going to happen is we're going to keep fucking up the planet until we get to a point where the trees are burning enough to cause a dust cover of the planet, so we get not nuclear winter or whatever you want to call it, but we have a lot less solar gain to heat up the
Oh no,
planet and we
no,
reach
no.
stasis. Is that what you're saying?
This the Cretaceous is noteworthy in that the dust, the lost deposits that are fossilized, are uniform all around the planet. That meant if a dust storm wrapped itself around the world. I'm not talking about occluding the atmosphere. I'm talking about removing the clouds and more sunlight goes into the ocean.
So that's not slowing down climate change. What
No, it's
causes?
accelerating it 3 times.
Okay,
That's the
fine.
rough number.
All right, so we're going to get to, so somewhere between now and when we reach stasis, the climate's going to get worse very fast. Okay?
Well, this idea of stasis isn't borne out by geologic evidence.
Mhm.
I mean, the whole fundamental idea that if you too many people had this idea that CO2 was like pressing on an accelerator, and you cut emissions, you ease off the accelerator. That's bullshit. The second is if it would emissions would just gradually come down because of it'd be soaked up by the ocean, the others. That takes again, that is a questionable assertion because the Earth cycle gets locked in certain energy levels throughout its history. If
Mhm.
we get locked in a Cretaceous feedback loop, it isn't going to matter what the carbon level is until it falls below a lower threshold.
So you're very pessimistic that we're going to get to a stasis in 50 years.
You'd have to be bold. I mean, like bold, like World War III bold. And I just don't see people are going to do that.
Wait. Even if it's ridiculous that people are going to cooperate, what is it you want them to do?
Oh, again, the most effective way to capture CO2, the cheapest way, is either with algae you grow on land or decomposition of limestones where you inject the CO2 into like a basaltic lava flow.
That's what
Again,
they're doing. They're doing that in Iceland, and they have an outside effect, but of course they're a tiny part of the world. And
oh yeah,
so
but yeah, but you look at you are going to need a massive amount of concrete to rebuild cities, to rebuild infrastructure. Because you aren't talking about 5 meters of rise. They're talking about, 15.
okay, but nevertheless, when do you think we are going to have the climate's going to stop getting worse? And what scenario is going to make that faster?
Well, I see we're going to go into the Cretaceous, and it's going to stabilize in the Cretaceous again at the point you start losing ice caps and sea level starts rising fast. It's obvious that the whole world will be convulsed into adaptation to that.
Okay,
Now,
I agree. I agree with you.
maybe
The
you've got
climate,
enough robots to mine basalt, crush it up, and spread it around. Maybe you grow, they dig huge, they turn large desert areas into algae farms. I mean, it isn't impossible. It's not. I mean, this idea that we're going to make changes in the power grid that's going to stave off. I think maybe it might be a 2 or 3% solution. I'm telling you honest about that because when I see tropical air at the pole, that was a core prediction of my geology professors. You know you're cooked when you see tropical air at the pole.
All right, so does that mean,
I don't see that anybody has to die in the future. I see plenty of food that'll grow in the Cretaceous-like weather patterns. I see plenty of ways of housing people. I see plenty of ways of reforming our healthcare system.
okay,
But
so,
it's all those together that is going to cause us to adapt to the future world, figure out a good way to live in it, and then we can talk about, bold things. It's kind of like an ambulance ride. You need to stabilize the patient before you really start talking about changing the climate.
Amen. That's right. We
I mean,
need to ultimately focus in on creating sustainable human beings and less emphasis on creating sustainable energy policies.
again, I don't know what you mean by sustainable human beings.
Well, I mean, people that ultimately can wind up pursuing sustainable lives, which means that they can ultimately produce enough food or enough resources that they can get others to grow food for them. They can ultimately get an education, they can have communications, they can have transportation, okay, within the flow of their lives.
Okay, so are these people going to be living on land that's over 100 feet above sea level? Is that what you're saying?
Well, again, I think that most of the overcrowding scenario that has been described can really be alleviated by proper housing, really on lakes and freshwater inlets and things along those lines, bays and harbors. The idea of having a house planted in a particular spot, okay, is just convention. It's not what people
You're saying,
want, but there's nobody out there that's doing anything other than like a houseboat. You know, it's not a practical alternative, but it alleviates a lot of relocation problems when you essentially transfer a significant portion of your population to living on water instead of land.
so namely, maybe what we should be doing now is recognizing we're pissing in the wind on utility modeling, and we need to start working on building houseboats.
How long can
You
you
know,
tread water?
no,
well,
hurricanes are disabused of anybody building houseboats. This idea
well,
people are going to be living on the water is, again, I got to understand how powerful hurricanes were in the Cretaceous.
Underwater makes more sense.
oh, come on, guys. Okay.
I
I mean,
moved to
enough of
500 feet
this.
above sea level.
Has anybody never traveled to Indonesia? Okay. I mean, don't you realize that a significant portion of the population already lives on the water? And guess what? They got hurricanes. Come
They don't.
on.
They don't have hurricanes like the ones in the Cretaceous, which would erase entire barrier islands and transport the sand 200 miles inland.
Well, okay. That was a bad storm. That sounds worse than Katrina.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
no,
Okay.
it's like Katrina lasting for a month.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that would be bad. But trust me, Katrina lasting for a month means we got much bigger problems than Katrina lasting for a month.
Well, all I'm saying is living on land in the deserts, which you can grow cactus, you can pump salt water on land, you can grow marine stuff. I see stupidity or resistance to adaptation as the reason a lot of people are going to die. And I posted a drought map of the United States. Here in Washington, we're getting ready for an extreme drought. I've gone from warning the people in the forest that they could get burned out in a firestorm to thanking them because if there's a firestorm and they die or they lose their house, They will be of service of educating people that we need to take this risk seriously.
Ah,
Okay.
okay. Again, I, I don't, I don't see self-recognition as being associated with public in any form, any
Okay.
form.
I just want to point out a second.
I
It's
think,
after 9
I
o'clock
think
in
that
New Orleans. We're past our normal bedtime, so to speak. I don't think we've solved the problem, but we certainly opened up a can of worms. I think maybe we convince ourselves that nuclear isn't going to get us to where we need to get to stasis anytime soon. And we might agree with Tor, it's going to slow down the process. And there are other ways to do it. But I think what we ought to do maybe at the next meeting and think about where we should expect to be in 50 years when sea level's risen X amount of times, 10, 20, 30 feet up, whatever that is, and how to get there so that we have a stable situation and what we can do in the short term to make more people live through it. I would like to hear that conversation, but we can't do it now. We're out of time. But I do think it was a good conversation in terms of opening my mind up. I never would have thought anyone would have said nuclear power is slowing down our ability to reach stasis. I never thought that.
it was a nice point.
Okay. And I I think it's important to think about where we're going. And there is a place like I can move to my brother's house in Colorado. I don't really like it there, but a lot of other people do. I own a house there. I know that's not going to get blown away by climate change in one way, but it could very be blown away by other kinds of things like fires and poor rainfall and so forth. I don't know if anyone really knows how to figure all this out. Tor feels like he has a handle. But I
I've been
would like to be
discussing
working on
this
a
for 40
solution.
years.
I'd like to be
40
working on a solution that helps get us to the point of how do we survive this worst case scenario, which doesn't even seem unlikely anymore.
Well,
Oh,
That's
I'd
let
like
me
to
count the
hear his
ways.
case.
wait,
Maybe
wait.
next week maybe next week you can present.
Yeah, why don't you plan on presenting to our next week? Where do you think we're going to be in 50 years and what we can do between now and then so that a larger percentage of people survive it? You think you could take that on, Tor?
I might be working. I got lucky. I worked a 12-hour day before this meeting.
Okay. Well, anyway,
Um, um, but assuming that is, I will try to prepare some slides over the weekend. But again, I'm going to challenge your minds to think in a radically different way because I'm witness to how AI is changing all sorts of things and speeding up research maybe as fast as 10,000 times.
okay. So I will
Kind of
be
research.
happy to entertain that. And I will point out that I think that AI tells people the wrong thing more than 5% of the time because AI is ignorant. But maybe that's not important. Maybe the other stuff is good. So I don't know. But anyway, let's call this a night, at least be stimulated by the diversity of conversation. And I did not dominate tonight, which I'm really proud. Okay. Okay. So let's
You owe
go.
me $2
Why do I owe you $2, Chris?
because you didn't dominate tonight.
So I owe you $2 because I didn't
That's
dominate?
right.
How does that
Okay.
work?
Well, I did you a favor. You owe me $2.
Okay. Anyway, thank you guys for having an interesting conversation. Brendan, this should be a recording. It probably needs a different title than the one we used to start it. So we'll get more people to
Oh
watch.
yeah. Well,
Okay.
yeah.
Is everybody already gone?
No,
No,
we still have the 5 original.
Okay. So one quick question. What did we decide about what was the guy's name?
He's got
Myron?
Michael Watson.
Michael Watson. What did we decide about his opinions?
Well, I don't know because we agree that nuclear power does provide baseload power. But Tor believes that's not going to speed up our ability to reach stasis.
Okay, I'm not asking you what you think about the technical thing on nuclear. I'm asking you to think about what his opinions are.
Well, his opinion is that we need a good percentage of nuclear for us to reach the optimal situation sooner. I think that's easy to read between the lines of what he
Would be
said.
great if he visited the group. I remember you were hopeful he would come tonight.
Yeah, but even if he doesn't, we have enough confidence in our own group. We are not a bunch of funkies who have no opinion and have come out of nowhere.
Sure.
Okay. We can address this. And if we're thinking about some magic bullet that's going to stop climate change in 2 decades, and we're helping to reach that, maybe that's how we're thinking. But if we really think about what's going to happen almost for sure in 50 years, we're going to wonder what we could have done to get there sooner. That's what I'm talking about. Okay.
Definitely.
So anyway, thank you guys for being in the meeting. And I don't know what we're doing next week, but we'll see. Okay. Good night.
All right. Good night.
Okay.